Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? Just give me a little head nod. Thank you. My name is Caroline Daniel. I just put this in the chat, but if you're having trouble hearing, it might be because a few people have their mics unmuted and sometimes just like moving your mouse around or shuffling around, you might be hearing that feedback. So if everyone doesn't mind just checking to make sure that their microphone is muted, and then if you have a question, obviously unmute, but that might help so that everyone can hear. Okay, that's just a little housekeeping thing. So my name again is Caroline Daniel, and I am joined by my colleague Clinton David, and we work for the Veterans Affairs Regional Office in Seattle. We're part of the Veteran Service Center, and we are also on the Rating Quality Review Team, or the Quality Review Team. And we are happy to be here. We love serving veterans. We want to be transparent and help serve you all as well, and be on the same team. So I think that the point of this Lunch and Learn is just to provide a little basic intro to some things that we do on the VA side, on the benefit side, and then hopefully answer any questions that you have. Clint, did you want to introduce yourself?
No, you've done a great job.
Oh,
Carol and I both
thanks.
work in quality. We do rating decisions day in, day out. We review raters. We work with the quality and the policy staff. So if you have anything that you have besides questions, but like feedback, we can take those to higher ups and let them know what the field is experiencing and maybe how to improve things. So we'll take any feedback you have and make some good out of it.
Yeah. We both have worked for the VA for quite a long time. I think, Clint, did you start in 2008 or 2007? I
Yeah, that's
started,
about right.
yeah, I started in 2009, pretty much fresh out of college, go Huskies. So yeah, it's been a really good job and I love it. So, okay, without further ado, I'm going to move on. This just is the intro slide that says Lunch and Learn. And this is who we are. We're from the Seattle Regional Office, and this is today's date. Our agenda is we just gave you an intro. We're going to talk about very basic benefits that VBA offers, sort of at like a low level, and then we can dive deeper into any questions y'all have. We did want to touch on something called the PACT Act, which I'm sure most of you have heard of if you've been working with veterans. If not, that's okay. We'll explain it. And then I have a bunch of resources linked in this PowerPoint, which we will be sending out at the end of the presentation that are helpful in filing claims and finding different resources for different types of veterans. And there's a space for question and answer. We can fill that space if you don't have that many questions with something else, but I was hoping that you might have some, or maybe during this presentation you might think of a couple questions you have. But also, this is pretty informal, so it's a lunch and learn. Feel free to eat your lunch. Feel free to interrupt me and ask questions. You know, we're here for you. So this is, yeah, this is for you guys. Okay, so the first thing that we wanted to go over is disability compensation. And what that is in a nutshell is we pay a benefit for service connection three basic ways. It's a tax-free benefit for veterans that have a disability or disabilities that were either they started or arose during service, they were aggravated by service, or they are related to military service. So this is just like very bare bones what disability compensation is. And I personally don't like the word disability because it makes me feel like the person is like, you know, unable to do things. Sometimes it might be offensive to veterans, and I'll call it like a condition. You know, we're so used to saying it at VBA, but it's not a disabling in the sense that like maybe it doesn't mean that the veteran has to be like bedridden. It could be a knee injury, it could be, you know, a mental condition. So when we say disability, that means like any medical condition that started in service, was aggravated by service, or is related to service. And in order to receive disability compensation, the person must have been discharged under other than dishonorable conditions. That's the other thing. So does anyone have any questions about that? It's pretty basic. Oh wait, are you trying to talk, Jennifer? Oh, okay, never mind. Okay. So here are some examples of those 3 different ways that we explained. Arose during service is, I said earlier, it could just be like a knee injury. So the veteran or the service member at the time, they were marching and they stepped in a hole the wrong way and they tore their ACL, and they had surgery, and now they have arthritis and they have instability in that knee. So that is an injury that is related to service that we would pay on a monthly benefit, and it would be directly related to service. All of these things would typically require an exam and an opinion, either relating it or saying it's aggravated. The last one, we don't really need that medical opinion because there's a presumption there, and I can explain that more in depth. But for the aggravation, that would be, this is a very common one. We see that when veterans enlist, they have something called pes planus, or flat feet, which they don't have an arch in their foot, but they don't have any symptoms. It'll oftentimes say mild or asymptomatic, but then all that marching that we know service members do and all that physical activity causes their arches to hurt more and cause problems, and so they are aggravated. So that would be an example if the examiner says the current condition has worsened more than a normal progression, then we would say that is aggravated by service. Okay, the last example of how something could be related to service is if it is presumed, or it's a presumptive condition, which you'll hear a lot. A very common one is Agent Orange or herbicide exposure. And we know that the dioxin in herbicides cause a lot of medical problems for our Vietnam veterans, including heart disease, diabetes. So anytime a veteran is diagnosed with one of those conditions and they have that exposure, we presume service connection. We don't need a medical opinion. As long as they have that diagnosis and they have that exposure, we can relate it to service. We just need the diagnosis. So that one's a little different. It's a little easier, actually. Okay, any questions so far? I know if you work in benefits, or you've worked with us before or filed a claim, or if you're a POA, this is probably information that you already know. So I'm sorry if I'm boring you. Okay, pension. I did want to touch on this a little bit in case you get an elderly veteran who might be in need of this benefit, or a low income veteran, maybe a homeless veteran. So pension is, I kind of think of it as like VA welfare. It's a tax-free benefit paid to wartime veterans with limited or no income, or they could also be over a certain age and they're permanently and totally disabled due to a non-service connected condition. They can receive this benefit also if they require housebound benefits. We call that special monthly pension, or additional aid and attendance. So the 2 things to remember with this one is that the income threshold is very low. I think it's around maybe $12,000 or $13,000 a year. So if they're making more than that much money for their income, they're not going to qualify. It's a very low income standard. And also, you have to make sure that the veteran served during a period of war. So I used to do homeless outreach when I worked at the Louisville regional office, and it seemed like quite a few of the veterans that I worked with served during the 1980s, which is not a period of war. So the late 70s through, I believe it's August 2nd, 1990 is when we started this current war that we're in, was peacetime. So, and then there's also a period kind of in between World War II and the Korean War, and then in between the Korean War and the Vietnam War, that they could also potentially have been peacetime. But sometimes we see that, oh, this is a low-income veteran, let's sign them up for pension. Oh shoot, they served during the 80s, so that's not going to be available to them. And this PowerPoint has live links, so when you click on it, it'll bring you to the Code of Federal regulations that defines the periods of war. So you don't have to remember the exact dates. If you have this, and you can just look, and it'll tell you like what dates were considered wartime and what dates are considered peacetime according to Congress. So that is pension. Any questions? Okay. So we got compensation, we got pension. Okay, now we have a little brochure that I've linked here that could be printed and shared with your fellow veterans or clients, which shows the steps to electronically file a claim for benefits. We can actually, let's go through this PowerPoint and then I'll come back to this and we can go over it because this PowerPoint is pretty brief. It's not going to take that long to go through. So I'd like to kind of go over this because it has some really helpful tips. But this shows veterans like how to file a claim on e-benefits. And again, you could send them the link to the PDF or you could send them the, oops, I'm sorry, I'm going too fast. Hold on one second, go back. Or you could print them out and give them, some people like things in paper. Okay, I'm not quite used to Zoom, so I apologize. I'm more, we use Teams a lot with the VA. Okay, so lastly, I wanted to cover PACT Act briefly. So PACT Act is a law that was signed on August 10th, 2022, and it's also 1710 is the law, the USC law number. And the main thing about PACT that's kind of different is we consider toxic exposure risk for veterans. And we infer this now on our end of the house. We're kind of putting the onus more on the VA to figure this out, as opposed to having the veteran tell us what they were exposed to. And the different ways that we are able to do that is the hospitals now keep track in a report of different exposures. It's called an ILA report. It's a tracking system that might tell us the veteran was exposed to radiation or solvents or different things. And then also we can make the determination ourselves. And we do these things called Terra memos, which it's where we list if a veteran was exposed to a toxic exposure and what it was. I'm actually one of the station's subject matter experts, and we've been fielding a lot of questions internally and getting to the bottom of it, but there's still a lot of questions that we have. And so I always tell people, like, err on the side of the veteran. And if you think there is any kind of exposure, just concede it and we'll leave it up to the doctor. So, you know, the more information we provide, the better with this. So the definition of a TERA is very broad, and it requires us claims processors to consider evidence of record. Like it could be a statement, it could be related to the veterans where they served or their job, their MOS duties. And regardless of what they're claiming, you know, we need to consider all these exposures. There's no minimum level of exposure or participation to qualify for most of these things. So it's a pretty broad law that we're still working on, but hopefully it's going to really benefit veterans. And I have seen some claims be approved that maybe in the past never would have because of this law. So that's pretty cool that veterans are now getting compensation for things that were caused by service that they deserve entitlement to. So it's a pretty big deal. And I know that we've received a lot of funding for it. So this link is for the PACT Act information page. And I'm also going to provide a more in-depth PowerPoint on the PACT Act. It's very in-depth. It would take over an hour to go over that one. It was designed for VHA, and it's just further reading if y'all like to look at it. This is a link to VBA public-facing media and publications, where a lot of these links could be found, and how to file benefits, and like that brochure that I showed earlier. All of these links are live. So there's resources available for homeless veterans, incarcerated veterans, because when a veteran is incarcerated, then they cannot also receive all of their VA benefit. And so, well, if they're incarcerated for over 60 days due to a felony, if they're just like in jail, that's different, but that's information about that and what to do, because we don't want someone to get out of being incarcerated and then they all of a sudden owe all this money. So that's something to help them. There's also a link for LGBT. They didn't have Q, but I think that should be on there too. Veterans, minority veterans, Native American veterans or Indigenous people veterans, former prisoners of war, women veterans, and military sexual trauma coordinators. So unfortunately, the military has a high rate of MST related PTSD. So post-traumatic stress disorder that is caused by sexual trauma. So we have specific male and female coordinators at the regional office in the hospital that can work with these veterans. It's a very vulnerable population. It's very brave to talk about these things, and so we want to take extra care for them. The threshold to become service connected is much lower, because we know that these things are highly unreported in the military, especially for veterans that served, prior to tailhook, like prior to the late 70s, when there wasn't really much for sexual harassment training and all that stuff. So, okay. Are there any questions so far?
We did have a question in the chat, which
Oh, I'm sorry.
no, you're okay. Clinton's been keeping an eye on them, and he's trying to get a clarification. But James shared, does AFFF solution fall under the PACT Act now as well?
Yeah, what is AFF?
Hey, Joey, Caroline, I can actually answer this. No, it doesn't. That is that's the stuff that they use to put out fires. However, we do still request that they report that when they go to the VA to VHA, so that we can start getting the amount of people that are affected by this, because that's written into the law as well.
So we
Sorry,
wouldn't
Caroline.
no, it's okay. So you're saying that we wouldn't consider that aqueous film form? Is that like what the firefighters? Is that the same thing that we
It's
always?
not considered a presumptive.
Oh, it's not
Like,
considered a presumptive, but it would
yeah.
still be considered a toxic exposure,
It would
right?
be a toxic exposure, but it's not necessarily one of the presumptives where we have, oh, this causes this,
Right.
like,
It's not like herbicide exposure,
Right.
but it's definitely something that the veteran should tell us so that we could let the doctor know. Like, say they have
no,
a
so they should let their doctor know when they do their
Tara.
no, they do at the hospital, they do a yearly or every 3 years they do a toxic exposure risk that they do, where they go through the doctors, and that's about the VHA gathering the information so that VBA can ultimately make a decision later based on the way that the law is written.
Okay.
We have to do the research first before we can do any more presumptive information with the AFFF. So yes, please keep applying and keep telling your doctor that you think you were exposed to this, so that we can make those connections. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
That's deep nitty-gritty in the law. Sorry.
Okay. What is a recommendation for homebound veterans who cannot get in to see a VSO? How can they start? and also be assisted to gather what they need to proceed? That's a really good question. Okay, I'm gonna show you this. I'm gonna stop this share. And I'm gonna share something else really quick. This e-claim brochure, I think, might answer that question. Okay, share screen. Okay. Do you all see my screen? Oh, wait, share. There we go. I gotta hit share. Okay. This is the brochure that I said y'all can print out for everyone. I can also put this in the chat if it's helpful. Where is the chat? One second. Sorry. Oh, there it is. It moved over here. Okay. Okay, there is the link to the brochure. Okay, so this tells a veteran how to find a VSO. So it kind of depends. If they're a homebound veteran and they're unable to access a computer, that's a little trickier. But this tells veterans how they can file an e-claim online, and it gives them tips. It says to gather all your documents, make sure you read and fill out all the forms completely. You can ask for help from a VSO, and then you're going to submit all your relevant required documents, including medical records, especially if you're going to a private provider. You can consider submitting a disability benefits questionnaire. That might be something helpful for a veteran who's homebound, who they have a doctor that knows them already, and they can review their records and fill that out without having to make the veteran travel. A lot of the exams aren't always right by their house, and we know it's a hardship on them to get to a contract facility or a VA medical facility. If they do need to go to a VA exam, it is important that they attend. And if they can't attend, then they need to let us know and the reason. So an electronic claim or an e-claim, it's a little faster and easier. The one thing I was gonna note is the 5103 notice, which is the legal information that we provide to veterans. Sometimes that can hold up their claim if they don't waive that notice or say they received it. I know that's like a weird little nuance, but I've definitely seen that kind of delay the claim. So, but this just shows veterans, like, here's the website. Make sure you have all those checklists done, and then you click apply for benefits, and then I'm assuming it's a compensation claim. Then you can start a new application, answer the questions about your claim. You identify any federal records, like if you go to a VA medical facility, or if you were treated at a military facility, if you have records to submit, where they are, anything else you want to say, like depending on the claim, every claim is going to be different. So, and then upload is if you have so a disability benefits questionnaire is our very different way of saying like a VA exam for claims. So that's what a DBQ is, if you're wondering. We like to rename things and call them weird acronyms at the VA, just like the military. I guess we followed that trend. So I know this is again, maybe not the easiest thing for someone that isn't very tech savvy, but it's a nice option. Let's see.
Caroline?
Yeah, the link did not post.
Yes, I just got a quick question.
Sure.
As far as the PACAT, if someone's 100% total and disabled, should they still apply for the PACAT? Would that?
You can actually get a higher level of compensation if you have a single condition that's 100%, and then additional separate conditions that are a total evaluation of 60% rated together. That's called statutory housebound. So that's a potential.
Okay.
I think it's always worth applying if it's related to service. for one, I know it can be a lot of work, and if the veteran is totally disabled, maybe they don't want to fool with it, but there's special monthly compensation they could be entitled to. So say they have diabetes, right? They're 100% combined, but now they're going blind because they have diabetic retinopathy. Well, we have special monthly compensation for blindness, so they would get an additional payment for that at a higher rate. So I think, every case is different. I'm not saying that's the case always, but I think that like people forget about the additional special monthly compensation benefits that veterans can receive. The other thing is like if they're married and sorry to be morbid, but if the veteran passes away due to a service-connected disability, then their spouse could be entitled to death indemnity compensation. They could be, receiving widow's pay at a higher level. And if the veteran didn't apply for something that they ended up dying of, then that wouldn't be related to service, so, or we wouldn't have made that determination in time. So anyway.
And also, one more question.
Sure.
So I guess I got some veterans here where I'm at, with false information. I don't know if it's false. I'm not even gonna say that, but information stating that they're not able to work if they're 100% total and permanent. Is that true? Is that false? Or
Are you
how does
talking
that-
about individual unemployability?
That's what I assume, and that's what I told one of the veterans, but he's under the impression that he's not able to work. And
Oh, if he is 100%, if he's just 100%, like not due to IU, he can still work. That's fine.
even total and
if
permanent.
Mhm.
So if he's 100% total and permanent, he still can work.
Yes, it just can't be due. So IU is a little different. Individual unemployability, we do pull from the IRS. And if you're reporting income and you're also getting IU, we'll probably stop it if it's over a certain amount. And we'll send a letter and let you know, like, hey, you reported that you can't work, due to your service-connected disabilities, but we're paying you at the 100% rate, even though you're only 70%. But there's no rules for like just being, I guess I'd call it like straight up 100%.
Okay.
Yeah, and working.
Okay.
It's more for
Thank you.
IU that you would worry about. You're welcome. Actually, I think we have some VA employees that are 100%. So, yeah, it happens. Not that anyone wants to be 100% disabled, but if you can still function in your occupation, that's great. Is there a way to meet with a VSO in person to help with the electronic filing? That'll be a question for the VSO. I have gone through all the disability rating Word documents, but I want to ensure I don't miss anything or my determination on a specific thing that would cause me not to file when in fact I should. Is there any links that can be provided about IU and what the stipulations are surrounding that? Yes, there's a lot of links we could provide on that. Let me.
And that's something, Caroline, too, if you don't, super have access to it right now, I can send out in my follow-up email as well.
Okay, so basically, I can just pull up the regulation for IU. Hold on. Are you still seeing my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so this is our manual. Wait, I'm gonna move this thing over. Okay, so let's see here. This is where IU lives, right here. There's some general information about IU, but the law that controls it is 4.16, 38 CFR 4.16, and it says to establish entitlement to a total disability rating for compensation based on individual unemployability or IU, the veteran must be unemployable in fact, So they're unable to secure or follow substantially gainful employment. Now, they could maybe volunteer. They could umpire their grandkids' baseball game and make like minimum, $12 an hour or something a few days. That's fine. Like below poverty line, just like marginal employment is okay. But by the reason of a service-connected disability. So they can't work due to their service-connected disability, and they meet the scheduler requirements, or they have an extra scheduler IU evaluation under these provisions that have been approved by compensation service. Let's look at this together. What does this mean? Did it open? Hold on. Open a new tab. Oh, it's loading. Oh, here we go. Okay, so 4.16a says total disability ratings for compensation may be assigned where the scheduler rating is less than total when the disabled person is in the judgment of the rating agency unable to secure or follow their gainful occupation as a result of their service-connected disability. So they can't work due to their service-connected disabilities. And either one disability is rated at 60% or more, and there are two or more disabilities that shall be at least 40%, or there's a sufficient combined degree to 70% or more. So for the purposes, so that's the scheduler criteria. Either combined to 70 or 60% with one at 40. And then there's some, the way that we calculate these things, because you might see like a bunch of joints that are like 10%, but we can kind of combine them as a single body system, or if it's like Parkinson's disease and, that each thing is only 10 or 20%, but it all adds up to 70% because it's all Parkinson's. That would be this 0.2 disabilities resulting from a common etiology. Or a single accident could be like a traumatic brain injury from an IED. And then the extra scheduler is down here. And that requires like a approval from compensation service. So that's what IU is, the requirements. IU is kind of complicated as far as like our development process. We consider economic and non-economic factors. We send letters to employers. We gather information from vocational rehabilitation if the veteran had gone there. And we also request records from Social Security and review those. So there's a lot of evidence gathering and components in our determinations. So it would probably take a while to go over all of this, but this is where it lives. Any questions on that? Okay. Let's go back to the chat and see what else we got. The hyperlinks aren't coming through. Huh. Interesting.
We're getting it sorted out. I also am already writing up my email and have included all of the links shared thus far.
Okay. I'm making sure I didn't miss anything up here. Yeah, we'll make sure that in the email you guys can gain access to the PowerPoint and the other links. Okay. How many hours are they able to work under the TDUI? Clinton provided this, so it's poverty level. It's not really hours worked. So if they make above poverty level, and that's always changing. So right now it's about 12,000. But like Clint says here, it's always better to be 100% due to service-connected disabilities because then you can work if you want. Oh, sorry, it's actually, it's gone up. 14,500 for 2023. And we all know that in Seattle, that's not going to get you very far to live off of. So, okay, what other questions do y'all have? Anything? Oh, that's Clint, did I miss anything? Should I go over anything else?
No, the one thing I would just, you guys are touching a lot of veterans, and the PACT Act is, it's big, and it's the most revolutionary thing the VA has introduced, at least since the 50s. So it's good to have an understanding about the basic concepts of the PACT Act itself. We throw around words like presumptive and toxin and all this other stuff. But what we're really looking, if we can step back, what we're really looking at is a basis to grant service connection for things that the veterans have been previously denied service connection for. Now, in some cases, we can do that based on presumption, meaning you have a veteran who served in a qualifying area and it's a recognized toxin. And all of us are familiar with the Agent Orange and RBN veterans. That's an example of a qualifying PACT Act presumptive disability when we're talking about something like CAD, like heart disease or prostate cancer. So it's really important to understand that there's this two-path method to grant service connection under the PACT Act, and presumptive is only one of the two paths. So a lot of those veterans, they're probably already granted, honestly. Hypertension was a new condition under the PACT Act, and some new conditions came out for Southwest Asia veterans. But the presumptive path isn't the most expansive portion of the PACT Act. The more expansive portion of the PACT Act and the more confusing portion is actually pretty simple. It says that if you're a veteran who served at any time and any place in the world or in the United States, and you have a disability, and that disability might be related to a particular toxin, the VA will help build your claim, meaning we're going to go out there and get an exam and get a medical opinion as long as we can corroborate, number one, a current disability, number two, exposure to any toxin. And we're going to go out there and we're going to develop that claim to see if a doctor is going to say that that disability was due to that toxin. So if you're talking about something to put out fires, if you're talking about working with jet fuel, if you're a mechanic and you're working with solvents, those are all toxins, and we should be able to corroborate them to varying degrees based on your MOS or buddy statements and things like that. And then if you have a disability that you've been denied for, and there are some exceptions, but if it's something you've been denied for, we now have a new path to grant you service connection. So a lot of veterans fell through the cracks because they didn't manifest the disease in service, but they were exposed to these toxins. And because they have a disability and they were exposed to these toxins, we can now go out and give the veteran another bite at the apple and get a medical opinion and ask the doctor whether or not the current condition could be related to those toxins. And that's a huge benefit to the veterans who were previously kind of disregarded their claims because there was nothing in service. So I think if you're helping these guys, the presumptive is fine. It's good to talk to them about it. But a lot of these other guys are going to have issues that aren't going to be on the presumptive list. And so we don't just stop there. What we need to do is look at that other path of service connection and consider whether or not we can obtain direct grants of service connection for these other disabilities that have been previously denied. So if you guys know that inside and out and can kind of speak to it, I think that's going to be a ton of help to veterans who've been denied things before or didn't think they could get service connected because they didn't have the condition in service. So I hope that helps.
That's a really good point, Clint. Thanks for sharing that. So I actually just noticed this sentence at the top of this is our internal PACT Act information page where we have links to all the resources. It's nice they housed everything here. I actually think they did a pretty good job, the team that worked on this, because for a long time it was like we'd get a policy change and it's like piecemeal, trying to find that email, trying to find something before they update it in the manual. But it says here, the Sergeant First Class Health Robinson honoring our promise to address comprehensive toxins acts of 2022. So that's where the PACT comes from. And it is a new law that expands healthcare and benefits for veterans exposed to burn pits and other toxic substances. But like Clint said, it's sort of like our promise to address these other exposures and conditions that potentially developed. It expands and extends eligibility for VA healthcare for veterans with toxic exposures of the Vietnam, Gulf War, and post 9/11 eras. It adds more than 20 new presumptive conditions for burn pits and other toxic exposures. I can go over what those are if you want, because those are ones we're seeing a lot. It adds more presumptive exposure locations for herbicides and radiation. exposures, and it requires VA to provide a toxic exposure screening to every veteran enrolled in VA healthcare. And then it also helps us improve with funding our research, our staff education, and treatment related to toxic exposures. So I'm going to pull up the SOP, and I think that might be probably the best thing to look at together. It's very long, but we can go over the Gulf War presumptives if you'd like. Wait, because these ones are pretty common. So this is on page 54 of 90. They keep making it longer. And then I'm going to scroll down. So in 2021, under this law, we added asthma, rhinitis, and sinusitis as presumptive for burn pit exposure. So those are still part of the PACT Act. But now, and these are all the recognized locations for a covered veteran for Gulf War era. So August 2nd, 1990, these duty stations, including the airspace above. And then after September 11th, 2001, we added these additional countries. So to help you kind of define. And then, hold on. Here are the new presumptive location or conditions that were added under 1120. Some of them, when they first came out, we were like, what? Head cancer? Like, that seems so vague. Like, the whole head? Like, what does that mean? But yeah, anything on the head. Cancer, neck cancer of any type, respiratory cancer of any type, gastrointestinal cancer of any type, reproductive cancer of any type, lymphoma cancer of any type, lymphomatic cancer of any type, kidney cancer, brain cancer, melanoma, pancreatic cancer, chronic bronchitis, COPD or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. I'm probably going to mispronounce this one. Constrictive bronchiolitis or obliterative bronchiolitis, emphysema, granulomatosis disease, interstitial lung disease, pleuritis, pulmonary fibrosis, sarcoidosis, glioblastoma, which is a terrible type of brain tumor, asthma, after service, chronic sinusitis, and chronic rhinitis. So those are some new presumptive conditions that you might just want to have, you know, in your mind, and if you're filing claims for veterans or working with veterans, so that you can be aware of them if they served in any of those locations during that period and they get any of these. Most of them, I would say, are cancer, a lot of upper respiratory. So, any questions?
I do have a couple of unrelated questions in the chat, but I want to make sure that we get through.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
What
I
you're
was just kind of
going
filling
through
up
there.
some time. I didn't know if you'd have time to go over all of this PACT Act, but I thought that was like an important one to share. Did a lot of collateral duties and sensitive. Yeah. When you go to the doctor for evaluation of linkage to chemical exposures, it's the doctor specifically trained. So our VA doctors and our contractors that we hire are, they have had training on this, and the information that we provide to them in our exam requests also provides resources and education for making these determinations. Okay, is there any info on toxins related to BRAC location, base realignment and closure, Superfund sites? So it's kind of up to the claims processor. They should be finding these things. I found a Superfund site on a claim I worked at, and I put that on the toxic exposure memo. There is a link on our PACT Act homepage that talks about military exposures and public health, and it has specific bases listed. It has like a whole glossary of things that we can research. So exposure categories, chemicals, radiation, air pollutants, occupational hazards like asbestos, lead, warfare agents. It is almost overwhelming. Like when you look at this, like all the potentials. So we just really do our best to provide as much as possible. It is kind of tricky if the veteran doesn't say what they had exposures to, and we just have to figure it out. So a lot of the times we'll look at like where they served, what their MOS was, and then what like like if you see like they were a wheeled vehicle mechanic, we're gonna know like that they had solvent exposure and fuel and stuff like that. Or if they worked on an aircraft, they're gonna have jet fuel exposure. And if they were a fireman, they're gonna have that foam exposure. So it really just depends. Almost every Navy veteran probably had asbestos exposure. So yeah, that's kind of how we do it.
And we had two, I think, important but quick questions. One is, what is the best way to get in contact with a VSO?
Okay, so this little brochure actually has a way to choose one. I guess it's kind of up to you, like which one that you choose. But if you go to find a VSO, veterans have to choose which one they want. So you can go into this e-benefits website, and then once you apply for benefits, under apply for disability compensation, you select request for representation, and then you accept the terms and conditions, and then you would click on the recognized VSO in your location, and then select from the list. But we can't make any recommendations from the VA side, like who to choose, because that's a conflict of interest for us. But that is how you would select one.
And then another question we had is a nexus letter still required versus chart notes and review?
So when we make a determination for service connection, it kind of depends. Like if it's direct, we do need, and it's more than a year after service, we do need a medical opinion or a nexus from a doctor. And typically it's not acceptable to send a private one. We do sometimes accept those, but usually it has to be done by our internal VA doctors or compensation and pension providers. And if it's like a presumptive condition, then we wouldn't need that. So I guess it just depends on the condition that's being claimed. If it's already service connected, then no, we wouldn't. We just need like a current exam. Looking at the chat to make sure I'm answering. Private doctors will not have access to the same body of evidence. Yes, thank you, Clinton. It's better for us, I would say, for those private examiners when it's like an increase exam, because then we're not worried about like whether or not we can use it to establish service connection. Caroline, on the e-benefits website, can you show where the request for representation link is? When I'm navigating through and click the apply for benefit, it brings me to the VA website to start the process for filling online, but I don't see the VSO link. Sure. Okay. Hold on. It's like opening it in a weird spot. My computer's a bit slow. Oh. Apply for benefits. Maybe they've changed this since they made that form. Disability compensation. Okay, what did it say on this brochure? Click on the recognize. I'm actually not a veteran, so I've never done this myself. I've never filed a claim myself, so I'm actually curious. Request for representation. I'm just gonna do this. Oh. You are right. Learn about. Huh. Maybe it's under here. Ah, I think they moved it under more resources. I'm sorry, that form's a little out of date. Get help from an accredited representative. And then you click on that on the left side right here. I can screenshot this and put it in the chat. I use my snipping tool a lot. I don't know if anyone else uses a snipping tool, but I really like it. Come on, where'd you go? I have too many windows open.
We can ensure any of that
Okay,
is
okay,
included in the
sorry,
email
just
if you
it'll
can
be,
forward it on
yeah,
in.
okay. Oh, here we go. It was covered up by my chat, but this is where you would find it on that e-benefits link, and it would be right here. I will copy this and put it in our little Zoom chat to everyone. Okay, there you go. So can you see that? Okay. So after you click on that, and it gives a little bit of information about like what an accredited representative or VSO needs to do to meet the requirements. They have a background check, they have to pass an exam, they take a continuing education course, and then it kind of says like what a VSO does and what it costs. It's usually better than a private attorney because they don't really charge. Some of the private attorneys charge a lot of money. So it's a little more affordable option, and it brings you to the form to fill out to appoint a VSO. Okay. Let's see here. After making a request, how long does it typically take to hear back from a VSO? I think it's different for every VSO. Are there any VSOs on here that would like to answer that question? I don't think it would take that long. Maybe hopefully within the week.
Yeah, so I'm going to clarify that this is not my opinion as a member or a employee of the WDVA, nor as a VSO for any given organization, Daniel. But what I would say is that I think what Caroline kind of said is true, that it will likely depend on the VSO. One thing I would say is that in my familiarity, folks who have been able to find and get in contact with VSOs who are in an employed position versus a volunteer position can sometimes be quicker or a little bit more reliable. Again, this is just my individual perspective and experience.
Yeah. Thank you for that insight. Okay, am I missing any other questions? We're getting close to 1 o'clock, so I want to make sure I cover everything. I really appreciate everyone's time on their lunch break and for your service to our veterans. Hey, Joey put something in the chat that says, thank you so much for being here with us today. Everyone, if you can give us a moment of your time to fill out our training evaluation, we greatly appreciate your feedback. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much, Caroline and Clinton, for being here and giving such a thorough and excellent presentation and fielding so many questions.
Of course. Anytime. Well,
Yeah, I would say
else?
unless anyone has some last immediate questions or y'all have anything else to wrap up, that we can go ahead and do that. righty. Well, hearing nothing, seeing nothing, and seeing the clock now flip over to 1 p.m. I just want to say thank you again so much for being here. Thank you for the work you do for and with our veterans. And thank you for supporting the Veteran Training Support Center, a program of your Washington State Department of Veterans Affairs. We look forward to seeing you in a training again soon. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you.